Mercedes just lost up to half a second per lap before Miami even begins. Not because they failed, because the rules changed overnight. A hidden power boost, banned. Their strongest race weapon, cut by more than half. The entire energy system they spent years perfecting, completely rewritten. And here's the part that should worry every fan. Every single change hits Mercedes harder than anyone else. At the exact moment they were dominating. This isn't just a technical update. This is a full reset of the competitive order. And if the data is right, the fastest team in Formula One just became vulnerable in a matter of days. It all began with a decision that didn't happen on track, and that's exactly why it matters. April 20th. No cars. No fans. No cameras. Just a closed online meeting between the FIA, every team boss, and every engine manufacturer. And what came out of that meeting was something Formula One almost never allows mid-season. A massive regulatory package, approved instantly, and applied immediately for Miami. Now stop for a second and think about that. Teams in Formula One argue over everything. Tiny details. Microscopic advantages. They protect performance like it's gold. So when all of them agree, unanimously, to changes that affect performance, something bigger is happening. Because this wasn't gradual. This wasn't planned months in advance. This was urgent. And officially, the explanation sounds simple. Safety. Drivers were complaining about how the cars behaved. Unpredictable moments. Strange slowdowns. Huge speed differences in certain parts of the track. From the outside, it sounds reasonable. Fix the issues. Stabilize the cars. Make racing safer. But here's where the story shifts. Because the FIA didn't introduce one small fix. They introduced a chain of changes, all at once. And when you line them up, a pattern starts to appear. Each rule targets a different part of performance. Qualifying, race pace, energy deployment, car behavior. Individually, they seem unrelated. But together, they reshape how a Formula One car works at its core. Now imagine this. You've built the fastest machine on the grid. Not just fast, but perfectly balanced. Everything works together. The way it accelerates. The way it stores energy. The way it delivers power at the exact right moment. Now imagine someone changes the environment around that machine. The rules. The limits. The behavior of the systems you depend on. Your car doesn't suddenly become bad. But it stops being perfect. And in Formula One, perfection is everything. That's exactly where Mercedes finds itself. Because their dominance wasn't built on one trick. It was built on harmony. A system where qualifying performance, race control, and energy management all work together. And Miami breaks that harmony. But here's the key detail most people miss. These changes didn't arrive randomly. They arrived right after 3 races, where Mercedes pulled ahead. Right after the gap started to grow. Right after the rest of the grid realized they were falling behind. And suddenly, the rules changed. So the real question isn't just what the FIA fixed. It's why these specific areas were adjusted. At the exact moment Mercedes became untouchable. The first real impact shows up in qualifying. And this is where things start to feel targeted. Because Mercedes didn't just have pace over one lap. They had precision. Every lap was built like a sequence. Corner after corner, energy carefully managed, everything leading to one moment. The final meters. Right before crossing the line. That's where Mercedes had something no one else could replicate. A last-second surge of power. Not across the whole lap. Not something obvious. Just a perfectly timed burst, exactly when the lap time is locked in. Think of it like running a race where your time stops the instant you cross the finish line. And somehow, you find a way to take one final explosive step at that exact moment. That step changes everything. We're talking about a gain of up to 1 or 2 tenths of a second, right at the end. And that might sound small? But in Formula One, that's the difference between starting first and starting behind someone. And starting behind someone changes your entire race. Now here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't illegal. It lived in that gray area. Right on the edge of what the rules allowed. Other teams knew about it. Some even tried to copy it. But Mercedes executed it better than anyone. Until now. Because for Miami, it's completely banned. No workaround. No interpretation. Just gone. And when that disappears, something subtle happens. It's not just the time you lose. It's how you approach the lap. Because drivers knew that at the very end, they had something extra. A safety net. A final push. Now, that's gone. And without that certainty, even the best drivers adjust. Slightly earlier braking. Slightly more cautious throttle. Tiny changes that don't look dramatic, but add up across the entire lap. And that's where performance really disappears. not in one big moment, but in a series of small hesitations. Meanwhile, Ferrari doesn't have to change anything. They didn't rely on that system, which means they arrive in Miami with the same rhythm, the same confidence, the same approach, while Mercedes has to rebuild theirs in just a few days. And here's the problem. Qualifying isn't just about starting position. It's about control. Start at the front, you dictate the race. Start behind, you react to it. So when Mercedes loses that edge, they don't just lose pole position. They lose control before the race even begins. And that's where the balance starts to shift. Because once you're no longer in control, everything else becomes harder. And what happens next, during the race itself, is where the real damage begins. And this is where Mercedes loses something even more important than qualifying: control during the race. Because no matter where they started, they always had a way to take the race back. And that weapon had a name: boost. At any moment, when they needed to attack or defend, they could release a massive surge of electrical power. Instant acceleration. Instant advantage. It was like having a hidden reserve, waiting for the perfect moment. Stuck behind another car? They could break out of the slipstream and pass. Need to escape a group of cars? They could create a gap in just a few corners. Everything was under control. But Miami changes that completely. The FIA limits that boost heavily, from full power down to a much smaller output. And that might sound like a simple reduction, but in reality, it transforms how racing works. Because now, that explosive advantage? It's gone. Overtakes don't happen instantly anymore. They take longer. They require more risk. And sometimes, they don't happen at all. Imagine trying to overtake on a straight. Before, you had a huge speed difference. You pull out, and you're already ahead. Now, you're only slightly faster. You move alongside, but the other driver can fight back, defend, close the door. And suddenly, what used to be easy becomes a battle. That's what Mercedes is about to face. And here's where the pressure builds. Because Formula One races are decided in moments. Small windows where everything lines up. A gap opens. A mistake appears. A straight gives you one chance. Mercedes used to dominate those moments. Now, those moments last longer. And the longer they last, the more time rivals have to respond. To defend. To counter. To stay in the fight. Which means Mercedes can't escape anymore. They get stuck. In traffic. In DRS trains. Losing time, not because they're slower, but because they can't break free. And once you're stuck in traffic, everything changes. Tires wear differently. Strategy becomes reactive. Pit stops lose flexibility. And the race slips out of your control. But here's the deeper layer. This change doesn't hit everyone equally. Ferrari, for example, relied less on that explosive boost. Their strength comes from consistency. From maintaining pace, not creating sudden gaps. So when the maximum power drops, the field compresses. And when the field compresses, the fight gets tighter, closer, more intense. Which sounds great for racing. But it's a nightmare for the team that built its dominance on being able to escape that fight. And this is where the entire dynamic shifts. Because Mercedes is no longer the hunter or the controller. They become part of the pack. And when you're part of the pack, anything can happen. Mistakes, incidents, strategy gambles. All the chaos they used to avoid now becomes unavoidable. But just when you think losing that race control is the biggest problem, there's something even more subtle. Something drivers feel, corner after corner, without even looking at the data. Because the car itself no longer behaves the way they expect. And in Formula One, that's where everything truly begins to fall apart. And this is where the problem becomes invisible. Because up to now, everything we've talked about affects speed, lap time, position. But this next change doesn't show up immediately on the stopwatch. It shows up in the driver's hands, in the feeling of the car. And that's where things get dangerous. There's a system inside these cars that controls how energy is recovered when the driver slows down. And when that system reaches its limit, something strange happens. The car starts to resist. Not like normal braking. Something different. Drivers described it as the car slowing itself down. Unexpectedly. Sometimes smooth. Sometimes abrupt. Almost like an invisible force interfering with what they're trying to do. That system is called superclipping. Now here's the key. Mercedes didn't just understand it. They mastered it. They knew exactly when it would happen. How strong it would feel. How to use that resistance to help rotate the car, to control entry, to manage the balance. It became part of their driving style. Part of how the car worked. But Miami changes that completely. The FIA removes the inconsistency. They align the system so it behaves the same way every time. Smooth, predictable, controlled. And again, on paper, that sounds like an improvement. But here's what actually happens. When something unpredictable becomes predictable, everyone resets. Because the advantage wasn't the system itself. The advantage was understanding it better than anyone else. Mercedes had spent years building that understanding. Through simulation, through data, through driver feedback. Now, all of that becomes irrelevant. It's like learning how to run perfectly on a surface that suddenly disappears. You don't become worse, but you're no longer ahead. And for a team that was leading, that's a massive loss. But it goes deeper than that. Because drivers don't just drive with data. They drive with instinct, with trust, with muscle memory built over thousands of laps. They know how the car should react before it even does. And when that reaction changes, even slightly, confidence disappears. Not completely, but enough. Enough to hesitate, enough to question, brake a fraction earlier, turn in a fraction safer, apply throttle a fraction later. And those tiny fractions? They stack, corner after corner, lap after lap, until suddenly, the gap is gone. And the driver doesn't even fully understand why. That's the kind of loss you can't fix overnight. Because it's not just engineering, it's feeling. And while Mercedes is trying to rebuild that connection, their rivals don't have to unlearn anything. They just adapt. Faster, cleaner, with less to lose. And this is where everything starts to connect. The qualifying edge, removed. The race control, reduced. The energy rhythm, disrupted. And now, the very behavior of the car, changed. For different pillars. All hitting the same team. At the same time. And when that happens, it's no longer about losing performance. It's about losing identity. The car Mercedes built doesn't behave the same way anymore. And when that identity breaks, so does the advantage. But just when it seems like the damage is already done, there's something even bigger waiting in the background. Something that doesn't affect just one race, but the entire season. Because while Mercedes is losing performance now, another team might be about to gain it continuously. And if that happens, Miami won't just be a turning point. It will be the beginning of something much bigger.